Hi, welcome back to Scheetz So Creative. Today we're going to talk about how to do an edge-to-edge design on a quilt in the Bernina Q-matic system. This is one of the better functions of this system in my opinion. I have my complaints, although I do love the system. There are some things that could be better well developed, but we'll let Bernina get to that over time. So let's get to what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so first things first, the quilt has been loaded up. It's nice and square on the machine. I've basted all the way around. I have started up Q-matic, and I have set my safe area. I'm going to assume that you know how to do those basic things. If not, leave a comment and tell me you'd like to see a video on how to do that, and we will try to make that happen. So at this point, I'm going to come into Q-matic over here, and I'll set up my screen grab so I make sure I post that up for you, and we'll be right back. Okay, so at this point, as I've said, the safe area is set, the dimensions of the quilt are entered in. If you don't know how to do that, to enter the dimensions of your quilt, you're going to click on this icon right here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. You're going to click on this icon right here, and you're going to enter your dimensions for your quilt top in here. Once that's done and your safe area is set, you're ready to start laying your design. So we're going to double click on our panto here. In this case, it's called Starry Dreams. I already like the size of this one, so I'm not going to be manipulating that. Now there's two ways here that you can repeat this pattern. You can use these icons here to repeat across, and then you can use this kind of icon here and you can repeat across and down. Now there's different situations where you want to use this one, but in this situation we're going to repeat across the pattern first until we like our coverage, and I like that right there. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit so you can see. I'm going to align my top right about there and my side to side right about here. And we'll take care of this excess across the top and down the sides later. So the way I do this is, so I used this icon to repeat across, and now I'm going to go into the repeat to get my down. And I'm just going to make sure that I like my spacing, so it's a little loose. I'm going to button it up. 1, 2's too much. So we're going to put it right about there. I like the density of the pattern. And I don't like, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. What I don't like currently is this tiny bit here. I want to move that up and kind of split the difference between the top and the bottom. Now I could go in here and use my keypad and resize, but I like the way it looks in the quilt at this point. I might move, I'm going to cancel that, and I'm going to move this way just a little bit. And I'm happy with how that's going to come out. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in nice and tight. I'm going to have my design highlighted. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up in this top left corner here, and I'm going to use the scissors, and I'm going to trim it right at the top. And that's going to, what it's going to remove here is anything that is black. So in this case, I'm good to go. I'm going to go ahead and remove it. I'm going to go ahead and let it sew along that line. You can choose to jump stitch, but that is very, very time consuming. And if you have set up properly, that should end up where it'll get covered by the binding. So I'm going to highlight my design again. I'm going to click trim again. And this time I'm going to add vertical. And I'm going to click right up here in my corner again. And I am happy with that. And then I'm going to come over to this side. I'm going to highlight my design, trim. This time I'm going to do vertical. And if you see here, when I click up in this corner, we don't want to remove all that. We want to remove this, so we're going to click invert. And then it's going to remove it off of this side. And this is as far as I go at this point when I start to run a quilt. I leave the bottom on in case my dimensions are maybe a little bit off from top to bottom. That way, when I get down to the end in this last row, I trim that off at the end. So we'll cover that when we get there. At this point, I'm ready to start running this. So I'm going to go ahead. You know what? Before I do that, I want to talk about the difference between this and this. So when you repeat across using this icon here, it's going to just continuously sew. It's not going to jump. If you repeat across using this icon, that is going to stop every time the initial pattern ends. So in this case, it'll run through and then it'll stop here, and then you have to start it again if you use this one to repeat across. If you use this one to repeat across, it avoids that stop-start. So that's the difference there. And now we're going to go ahead and click play. Everything is nice and in my safe area. The black part is what's going to sew before I have to advance. And I'm going to say yes. At start point. And then the machine's going to go ahead and move to this start point on the left side of my quilt. So once it does that, so I'm going to pause off real quick and refocus for this end of the quilt. All right, so at this point, we're going to pull our bobbin thread up through. I like this to already be through here, so I'm going to just tuck it in, and we're going to let it rip. Okay, at this point it's going to run through the first row, and then we'll tie it off at the end of that one and pull it back through and run the second row, and then I will show you how to realign. Okay, let's try this again. I messed up on this row and forgot to turn the microphone on, so I'm going to show you again for me, but for the first time for you, how I advance the quilt. So it's finished the row. I'm going to go ahead and pull my threads through, and I do that. I do 2 loops, and I pull the center up, and I give it a snip, and then I drop my leaders and move it out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and pop the clips. And you know what? I will just do this real quick. So in order to keep the video a little more short, I'm gonna go ahead and stop right here. I'm gonna advance. I'm gonna line up my sides. I'll talk about how I did that, and yeah. All right, so at this point, I've done my basting stitches down the side, made sure everything stayed nice and straight, put my quilt clips back on, and advanced. Now I'm gonna pick my point here, and I'm gonna put my laser point right on that point. You kind of have to eyeball it with your needle. If you don't have the needle point laser, always push down. If there's a little gap, that laser might be off, but if you push down and make sure you're right on your point, that helps. So I'm going to come over here. I've got my position. I like to zoom in really nice and tight, so we're going to do that. And this right here is the point I'm using. I'm going to click on my reposition. I'm going to use snap to point, and I'm going to point right there. And then I'm going to apply that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over and make sure that it hasn't shifted. So this side's still in. And I'm going to come over and make sure this side is still in, and it isn't. It's off just a tiny bit. So what I'm going to do is come back to my point. I'm going to zoom in even tighter, and I'm just going to move it over a tiny bit. Things shift a little bit, very minutely when you move things. So sometimes it's just a tiny bit off. That's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. So I'm going to come back in here, go back to my snap to point, and move it over just that much. And then double check on the side here. Not quite enough. And you'll see when I zoom out, you're not even going to be able to tell that I shifted it. It's just keeping everything in on both sides because I set a tight, safe area on this one. So I'm going to come back to my center. That looks good. I'm going to back out. I like to see where I'm at, and you see it looks like it's right on that point. So I've got my full row that's going to sew. I'm going to play. Yes. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and run this row, and when I come back, I'll come back at the bottom row to show you how I deal with the end of the quilt. So we're going to go to our start point. And it's going to go to its start point. We're going to pull our needle up. It's going to run the row, and we'll talk about how to trim off that bottom when we get down there. So we'll see you again in a minute. Okay, so at this point I'm at the end of the quilt, and I told you I'd show you how I deal with that bottom. I left the extra on the bottom so I could align it perfectly. And what I'm going to do is come down, and I'm going to set my lowest point. This corner on the end of this one was just a little bit wonky, but it's not going to hurt anything. But I like to make sure I'm down past everything, so when they square it up, they can use as much as they possibly can. So I'm going to set my needle point laser to the lowest point. I'm going to come over here and I just need to start my screen recorder real quick. Alright, so I've got my needle point laser to the lowest point, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to trim, and I'm going to click right on where that point is. I'm going to invert because I don't want to get rid of this up here. I want to get rid of this down here. So I'm going to invert, and I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And now it's all in my safe area. It's running off the bottom here. It might give me an issue there, but we're going to go ahead and click play. Nope, it'll run it right off. So we're going to say yes. Let it think for a second. At start point, it's going to think for a second, and it's going to go ahead and move over to its start point. And at this point, I'm going to let it run all off, and I'll close it out after that finishes. See you in a minute. All right, so that, as they say, is that. That is how to do an edge-to-edge design without it jumping in between. If you have any further questions, subscribe, leave a comment, and we'll do our best to accommodate. Thanks for joining us here at Scheetz So Creative. We love all you beautiful creative people out there, and we'll see you next time. Bye.